hosted mentoring where we talk about everything piano craft 3 times a week. We teach throughout the week. So today we're going to be talking about something that comes up a lot, and that is pedal repairs, but specifically with grand piano Lyre. Now, the Lyre system, or some people call it a Lyre. Have you heard that, Stacy? Some people call it like a Lyre. I've only ever heard it called a Lyre until somebody started calling it that. I'm like, what are you calling this? And they said Lyre. I'm like, all right, Lyre, Lyre, potato, potato. So the grand pianos, are a little bit different in that you have more of a solo kind of housing for the pedals, and it looks like this. This is from the Samick grand piano that we have, and this is pretty standard. You got your pedals, you got your pedal rods that go down in through here, and there's a series of things that can happen or can go wrong within the whole system, the Lyre system. And today we actually have one of those issues, and it's pretty common in a lot of grand pianos, and that is the damper pedal, which gets used the most. This far right pedal is creaky, and it's actually loose from side to side. So this happens a lot, whereas, you can actually see that one's actually pretty loose too. So that's the unicorda, or the soft pedal. Yeah, they're all a bit loose. So we're going to go ahead and pull open the housing. That's what this is called, the housing unit of the Lyre, to go ahead and see what's going on. So typically all you need is a screwdriver for this, and everything can come apart pretty easily. Keep in mind where you set the screws, because usually this is done at the customer's house, and it is really easy to lose screws inside the carpet, and I have done that several times. So do keep extra care where you're putting the screws, and if you wanted to go to the added length to go ahead and actually put the screws like in a piece of cardboard where they're actually labeled which one goes where. Some technicians will go to that extent. I really don't. I just kind of keep them close to where I know that they're going to go. Newer pianos are going to have these Phillips head screws, but the older ones will have a flathead screwdriver tip is what will be needed to get the housing out. So right here, I'm just unscrewing all these screws for the faceplate, and I'm actually just going to kind of keep track of them like this. And actually, now that I look at it, I don't even think I needed to take this one off, because it's not even attached to anything. It's just literally this guy. That's great. So, just so you know, Samicks and Young Chains and things might have a plate like this that doesn't need to come off to get to the housing. What you do need to do is this, though. On the upper side, as you can see, there's these series of screws. And so those are really the critical ones that you have to remove in order to get to the rest of the pedal assembly. So let's go ahead and just remove these screws. Honestly, sometimes the biggest thing, the thing that takes the longest with a pedal repair like this, is simply getting all the screws removed. And that can, sometimes I get to these and there'll be like a dozen plus screws that have to come out in order for me to open this pedal box. So I'm just removing all of these screws. Victor, welcome. We have creaky, loose pedals on this grand piano, and it's not great. So we're going to go ahead and actually fix all of that. Which again is one of the most common issues that comes up with grand piano Lyres. So I just about have all these loosened. I like to, if possible, keep the screws inside this little plate here, like so. If I can keep that in all of them contained, I'm usually pretty happy with that. Let's do this. So on the other side of this now you have this. And so the next thing that you're going to do is a lot of times these will lift, like just kind of lift upwards. In this case, it appears that we have a series of screws right here that I need to remove in order to get this plate out that holds these. Yep, sure enough. So I'm just going to remove these screws. Again, you can see how many screws need to be removed in order to just get to some of this. Okay. And every one is going to be a little bit different. It's weird. Okay. So here's what we're dealing with. I just pulled that up. We have a random weird piece of felt right here. I'm just going to set this aside like so. So that's what we're dealing with right here. And wow. So what I'm seeing right here is this. On the underneath side of this guy, you have this channel that you can see right here. This channel, and it goes all the way through, and that lands right on these dowels protruding through the pedals. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove this. So that's your pedal right here. Boy, we are breaking into this, y'all. Let's go ahead and just remove all these, because I do not like what they have going on here. Okay, so we got the pedals, the upper housing unit, which, by the way, just looking at this, it's missing a screw. I actually, when I was pulling these screws out, came out really easy, like maybe they're stripped, by the way. So one of the things I'm going to look into is getting another screw and then making sure where they're going in, they actually have enough grab. So let's go ahead and just kind of look at this one more time. All right, so I'm just going to remove this felt. And so what we have here is pretty common, and that is the felt itself has compressed and kind of deteriorated. You can see how deep these grooves are with it. And so what I want to do instead is get some kind of a leather. I find that the leather tends to work a little bit better long term. And so, and again, this is a very, very thin felt. And so by simply replacing all of these pieces with kind of a leather material, I think we're going to be in better shape. Questions about this so far? Nothing. Pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is start creating little pieces of leather that are going to go, actually what they're going to do, we can use this guy as our guide. They're going to go like this. So we're going to have some leather on either side of these pins. And I'm probably going to do what they did and have just kind of the full size bits of leather like that. I mean, you don't really have to, but I like the idea that it doesn't slide left or right. And I can see, just kind of wobbling that's what the issue is that the felt that they had put right in here had just compressed so much that now we were getting a wobble. So simply, let's just do this. Looks pretty good. Now we're going to have to decide if we want to go ahead and just punch a hole through that right there, or just kind of size it up around it. And I like the idea of actually going ahead. I'm going to cut this flush and just cut out a little notch for that screw. Sorry, the light keeps on going on and off. I don't know what's going on. Looks like there's a tornado or something out there. The Pacific Northwest. I'll just kind of notch out for that screw like that. See that? Pretty simple. Yeah, because you can see what they had before was just simply this. And another thing that we could do if we wanted to try something different is we simply drape a piece of felt like this around the pin. That's another option for us, but I kind of want to see what we get when we recreate kind of what they had, but with leather. Another thing that we're going to do before we actually install everything is I like to lubricate these pins with some of our super lube grease. And so we're going to do that before we insert everything. I'm just going to go ahead and cut some of these. You guys are so quiet today. Are you zoning out?
We're the quiet ones.
You're the quiet one. You're just taking in the piano, Lyre, repair, ASMR. What's going on?
You just get strips of leather from staff or what?
I do, yeah. You can get, it's not even leather nowadays, unfortunately. It's like leather. All right. Yeah, gone are the days where we can easily get leather. I do find that if you just go to your local like leather goods, because a lot of cities have some kind of a leather goods retailer, and so they'll actually have like a little leather shop, and you can usually get scraps of leather in different thicknesses for dirt. All right. So kind of that's basically what we're going to be doing right there. And putting this back on here, one of the things I'm noticing, I kind of like the idea of putting leather below and above. Just because I kind of want to encapsulate this, because I'm a little bit worried that if we just put leather on the top of these, which is what they did, I'm a little bit nervous that we're going to have some of the same issue. And by the way, if you're at a customer's house, this is not something that I recommend you do like as a just quick add-on service. You might get really frustrated really fast because you're like trying to do something nice for them and it quickly turns into something that is way bigger than what you thought. And so if I were in a customer's house, I would budget a good hour for this and just make sure that I had enough time. Yeah, because it's the worst is when you go to do something really nice and you're trying to, do a quick repair for somebody, but then you get in over your head. And this has happened to me so many times. You get in over your head and it's like you're trying, initially it just was something that you wanted to do that was nice. And now you've kind of sometimes made it worse because you're rushing through it. It just happens. And I would like to say that it doesn't happen very often, but early on in my career, it happened a lot. It was just little things that I tried to do to kind of add value, but at the end of the day, I kind of made things worse. Victor, I don't know if you had that happen before. You're out in the field.
Yeah, exactly what you're talking about with pedals. I remember it was on my mentor. Same thing. He's like, yeah, we can fix that pedal. It took us like 3 hours. We had to take the whole box apart. Yeah.
Yes.
You just never know.
You never know. I'm going to go grab some grease really quick, and we're going to go ahead and add the grease to these really quick. Crazy thing is I put it down here. This just goes to show, make sure you have everything lined up. Yeah, we're going to pretend I put grease in here. I don't know where that grease went. All right, so I've gone ahead and kind of put a little bit of leather right here as well as right here. And so I'm just gonna kind of put this pedal down in there. And it's nice and snug right there. So I'm gonna do the same thing with this other guy. And I do like the idea of felting the top and bottom. And again, I'm using the word felt even though it is leather. You guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, some of the worst issues that I've had have been in doing something like this, where again, I did not budget enough time. It was for a church, if I remember right, and it just did not turn out right. Okay, there's that. So now again, the big question is, do we add the leather on the other side? And I do like the idea of doing that, but what I'm going to do is first just place this on and just see if we have, yeah, we do have movement, and I don't like that much movement. So I am going to add another layer of felt, and we're going to see if that helps or if it makes it kind of worse because it's not, it just kind of too wobbly. This is another thing that you want to make sure you always have enough leather, felts, and everything inside your kit so that you can be mobile. Because a lot of times, especially when you're starting out, you might not have a full day's worth of appointments, and you might have the time to spend an extra hour or two doing stuff like this. But it's all for naught if you don't have the actual supplies needed to do the job. Okay, that definitely feels nice and snug. Way better. I can feel that it feels like there's a lot of nice pressure on everything. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and put these screws through. Yeah, and remember how I said this was stripped? Sure enough, it is stripped. So that's nice. Anybody guess what we're gonna have to do to fix that?
I would just put a toothpick in it.
Boom! Victor for the win. I actually put a little bit of wood glue on it too. Yeah, and so usually having some kind of toothpicks or some kind of pieces of wood handy is always a good thing to have. Just simply putting it down in there and then breaking it off. Pretty easy to do. Another thing that I'm noticing, and again, you're going to find this with the more entry-level pianos, unfortunately, but you might find like really weird random stuff. So one of the things that I'm realizing as I'm literally pressing these in is I think that these were meant to be metal screws, that some technician at some point decided to kind of put wood screws going into this metal component, which is great. Thank you. And this is going to be one of those things you're going to find that as you work, you're going to be like, you're going to follow technicians' work. And granted, not everybody has as much experience doing things, and a lot of times it's a learning curve. So I get it. But sometimes it's just you come into things and it's like, what were you thinking? And in this case, we're kind of hitting some of that right now with this job right here. Just trying to get it so that it's grabbing. And that one grabbed nice and tight. We kind of joke about this, but Stacy and I were both agreeing that like when people say they have a pedal issue, it's easy to say, oh, we got it, we'll take care of it, no problem. But when you get to it, it might be something this big where it's like, oh my gosh, what have we done? Or what?
No, it's so true. I like if it's a squeaky pedal, that's the only time I'll be like, I think we can fix that while we're there. But even that, if you have to rebush the pedal, I mean, it can just, pedals are just, you never know what you're getting into.
You never know.
Like, I've seen some crazy pedal repairs having to be done. So
I'm gonna go grab one more screw for this guy right there. Stacy, any jokes?
any jokes? I don't know. Let's see. I should have had that ready. I should have had it ready. I don't know. I want to send some pictures, but I don't have them ready. It's like I don't know if you guys can see that. Like we had a customer piano with maple key tops. You guys see that? Like that was interesting today. They were maple, like kind of like a harpsichord. I hadn't seen that before.
What kind of piano is it?
It was like an old upright, like it's an older one, like early 1900s. I just had never seen that before. It was really fascinating to me.
All right, we have all that nice and snug. That all looks good. Everything's going to kind of bolt down nicely. Just looking at this side-to-side play. And usually, yeah, that's way better. Yeah, that definitely solved everything. Again, usually if I have that super lube on hand, I'll go ahead and lubricate those pivot points as well. It's not a big deal because I replaced like all the leather, so it's nice and clean and in good condition. So I'm not too worried about that. But there are two other areas I kind of want to show you on these lyres that tend to be an issue. And one of them is creakiness in the lyres themselves. It's like just weird creaks. And a lot of times what it is, unfortunately, is the glue joints inside the components. So that, my friends, is a bigger deal. It's a bigger fix. In which case what you usually have to do is get some, and I've done this before where I mask off. Let's see if I can show you this. So a lot of times it's loose joint right here, or it's a loose joint over here. And it'll rock a little bit or ever so slightly or make a noise. And so when that happens, I typically will use blue tape and mask up all around it and then insert a little bit, try to break the joint open a little bit or so that I can squeeze some epoxy into it. I found that epoxy is the best remedy for me, and it seems to hold up really well. And especially if you use like a 5-minute epoxy, I find that it works really well. And clean up after you're done, just making sure, again, you're masking it so that you're taping off everything, because that stuff, if it gets on there and dries, it is on there. Another little rule of thumb for me is I always put the screws for the lyre braces back into this just so that I don't misplace them at all. Because whenever I tell you these things, it's not because I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. It's more like, oh, David probably messed something up and that happened. That's literally what it is. So it's just like, I'm not a genius. I'm not like, oh, it's a creative. It's literally just, hey, I messed up and this happened once and now I don't do it. All right, so everything's tight. The next thing that I want to do, again, if you have everything out, the next thing that you would want to do is lubricate right here where the pedals go inside these little rubber grommets, these little rubber housing. And so you put a little bit of that super lube right in there. And that's a great point to kind of put that in there. A lot of times, this is a good time as well. If you pull these rods out, to go ahead and add a little bit of Teflon powder to this bushing, this felt bushing right in here. Putting a little bit of Teflon powder in there is really a good thing to kind of keep everything smooth and free. There's 3 of these. I usually put it on a little screwdriver and kind of massage it into place. And then finally, you want to put a little bit of lubricant, a little Protect lube or super lube on the tops of these where it's going to touch the trap work. But yeah, those, that worked out pretty well. And I would be very surprised if they creak now. I would be, because they're definitely nice and tight and they should be just fine. So that's really, that was one of the more difficult, if I'm honest with you, that was actually one of the more difficult ones to repair. Usually when I pulled out that back housings, you're just going to be left with a couple screws that you would just tighten everything down. But in this case, we actually had to replace the leather or the felt with leather, and it cinched up nicely and it's good to go. Questions about that?
Just think how long that one took you too. Like you're at a service call and that just added on like another half hour.
Oh yeah.
Like easily to that. So yeah.
And it is one of those things that if you're able to fix something like that, that is a repair that the customers are usually like, thank you so much. Here, what do you need? Here, I'll pay it. Because it's the pedal issues are one of those things that really annoy the player. I don't know about you, but when it comes to pedal issues, I can handle a lot of tuning stuff. I can't really handle that much tuning stuff, but pedal stuff, it really bugs me.
Yeah, I put in the chat a few requests of pedal repairs we had this week. They're crazy pictures.
Oh, of our technicians?
Yeah, of customers like, hey, my pedals are broken. I'm like, do you have a picture? And then they'll send me these pictures. So you guys can see those in the chat. There's some wild ones.
You're the most random wild ones. Another thing that can cause issues is when, and I've had this happen several times, and it doesn't happen that often, and it sometimes fixes it and sometimes doesn't. And so if you notice that there's basically around the pedals themselves is some felt that kind of goes all the way around. And so in some cases that can get corroded, or if it's really snug, that can cause a squeak. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll simply just take it and I'll go and either lubricate with Teflon powder around that, that felt, or I'll actually replace that felt if it's corroded or, kind of scuzzy. But again, that's just another thing to keep in mind. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is something to know that could be an issue with the Lyres. One of the things that you should do at every service call, or at least recommend, is regulation of the pedals. And that's simply usually adjusting these up or down so that there's adequate loss motion and play in the pedals themselves. Yeah, and with that is how you do kind of your basic, more fundamental repairs on the Lyre. And again, give yourself enough time. Whenever we're doing a Lyre repair, I like to give myself at least an hour, because I don't know what I'm going to run into. And usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to be something that takes the full hour. And I hate running up against the clock. And because at the end of the day, everybody suffers. You're stressed out. The customer doesn't get the full service. Take the extra time, let the customer know, and you're going to be surprised how much they're like, okay, yeah, I know it's going to be an extra couple $100, but boy, if we can get this fixed, great. With regards to something like this, I have never charged people if I can't fix it. So let's just say I break apart everything and I'm doing this, and I might be on the outskirts here. Somebody may say, no, that's ridiculous. Charge what you're worth. I just have this kind of philosophy. If I can't fix it, if I said, hey, I'm going to spend an extra hour, it's going to be another $200 for me to fix this, and at the end of that 2 hours, I put everything back together and it's still not fixed, I personally don't like charging for that. But again, that's just me. But that is an option, that you're going to have to decide on what you're going to do, because you will come across things. One thing that is typical is buzzes and weird zings in the piano. And that happens from time to time, where you go there to try to find that, and you may spend an hour. And if you can't find it, you're going to have to decide what you're going to charge the customer for that. And I think that people are different. Stacy, I don't know what the technicians over in Utah do or what their protocol is on that. I know it's technician to technician.
Like if they can't fix it? I don't know if I've ran into that, David. I think they can always figure out how to fix it.
They're better technicians than that's what it is.
Well, I'm not saying that, but okay, if there's a really weird pedal repair, I'll send specific techs out, right? Like I don't I'll ask first, like I'll get pictures first. Like usually it's preparing, right?
Yeah.
So they're not blindsided by some crazy repair. So I think on the admin side, it's really helpful if we prep, right? Like if we know what my camera's really washing white now. Anyway, it helps if you have all that prep done, because then they can tell you, like, and like we sometimes will have one, we're like, let's refer someone to that crazy, but you'll see, like in the chat, I put some pictures. I always ask for pictures when it comes to pedals. So especially if they say anything like broken, I'm like, can I have a picture of what's broken? So I think that's probably why.
Yeah, and usually when it gets to the point where it's like, I can't fix it, usually it's something that you're like, in order for me to fix this, we need to start rebuilding stuff. We need to add new felt, add new leather, do a bunch of like a rehab on the pedal system, on the trap work. And usually people are pretty understanding about that. I guess now that I think about it, the things that I've not been able to fix are more noises that I could not figure out where it's coming from. And
that is true. We've had to come back out for stuff like that. That is true. They're like the squeak came back. We had this one really entry level grand at a restaurant, and I think we had to go out 2 more times after because it just like would not go away. My poor tech, he's like, again? I'm like, I'm so sorry, it's still there. But we got it. We ended up getting it. Like we figured it out, but it was a tricky one.
Yeah.
So I guess that,
Yeah, it can be crazy. It can get crazy. And I would just say be patient with yourselves, but budget enough time. Again, this is something that earlier on in your careers, as you're building your book of business and your day full of work, it's not as big of an issue because usually you have enough time. Usually you're not doing 4 a day, 3 a day, every day. And so you usually have a little bit of time to spend to do stuff like this. And feel free to charge, because this is a valuable service that you can do to your customers, and they will be thrilled if you can fix some of these things. And again, the side-to-side wobble is a big one. And a lot of times that side-to-side wobble is causing other issues, other squeaks and things of that nature. Sometimes you're going to get to the piano and they'll kind of have this weird, like, again, that looseness. And I'm actually kind of looking at this. This might have some of that because there's a bit of a gap right at this seam. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is sometimes you're going to have kind of a loose joint. And a lot of times the reason for that is when they go to move a grand piano, depending on the way they do it, a lot of times they'll put the lyre on and basically tip it onto the pad using the lyre, and that can break the glue joints. And I don't recommend that technique, as if you are moving pianos. I would recommend getting some kind of another brace to kind of put on there. Again, I get it. It's easiest to do it this way, but it could cause issues with breaking. Victor, you do a lot of moving. Do you have a protocol for that?
Yeah, we never move it on the Lyre. And I know a lot of movers tell me, well, you're just not doing it right. But I fixed dozens of of Lyres that are broken because of that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't do it. And yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's broken at the top. Usually it's at the top, sometimes at the bottom. But yeah, I use wood glue just so I can wipe it off. Because with the, yeah, like you're saying with the epoxy, if it dries on there, you're done. Like it's not coming off. Yeah. So,
did you say you don't remove the Lyre or you do?
oh, we never move it with the Lyre on. Yeah, we take it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either we'll put it down on its corner, like without the Lyre and do it like that, or we use a pony, the half circle to tilt it.
You know, the most calls we get on those kind of things are when the movers don't attach the Lyre correctly. Like it's just a really simple thing. They just don't double check before they leave. It's like I know most of them know how. They're really confident, but I get a lot of calls where they're like, something's not, and they think something's broken when it's not. It just needs to be, yeah. So
that's exactly true, because that happens a lot. Like they'll say something like the pedals are moving, or like the whole, like they call it like the pedal leg because they don't know what it's called, right? But the Lyre is like moving. Yeah. And I get there, and yeah, the bolts were just not tight, or the props were not tight. And I was like, did you just move like a few years ago? And they're like, oh yeah, we moved like a year or two ago, and they moved the piano. And I'm like, man, like these movers, they never can take the extra time to make sure everything's done right.
Yeah. You know what? That is so. I actually asked that same thing, Victor. If they comment on that, and I'm like, did you move the piano recently? And they will say yes so much of the time. So it's just taking that, not that I'm a piano mover, but I'm like, movers, just take that extra minute, 30 seconds, and just check it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Especially with if they have player systems for grands. I've done like 3 or 4 where the player system was things got knocked out when moving, and so the whole player system trap work on grands needed to be all redone. And that was a surprise for me, because they're like, something's wrong with the pedals. I get out there and it was a whole player system, and I was like, oh man. So, and yeah, that was like one of those things where I thought it was going to be like 10 minutes. I ended up being there for like 2 hours.
Oh. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, those are the worst, where it's like, this should be a 30-second, 5-10 minute repair, and then it just eats your lunch. And it's just in those moments I'm like, what am I doing? I'm such a hack. This is ridiculous. I can't believe this. And yeah, I had one, like I said, like a week or 2 ago, and that was just, I was there all day, like literally all day, and it destroyed me.
Yeah. Yeah, the last one I did with the player system kind of arm broke, and I'm not joking. We're there for 8 hours that day, like just working on that trap work, going back and forth to the hardware store. I hate those player system, the way they hook them up. Oh, it's so frustrating.
I see a player system and I run for the hills, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it the newer ones that you see those issues with?
Yes, the new QRS. There's an arm that goes, I think it's going to the sustain pedal, but that 90 degree is so thin. Like we were looking at it, like they bevel it out to that corner. I'm like, well, no wonder these corners always break. It's like razor thin.
They're really razor thin, and the most pedal that I would get for the QRS systems, they'd have damper issues once we'd move them. Oh, I kind of learned that if someone bought a player, because once they're set, they're great. But I always learned with a player, I'm like, I'm just going to automatically schedule us to come out in the few weeks, because just to...
Yep. Yeah, because it's going to get loose. Something's going to get knocked around, and it happens every time. And we always have to go fix them.
Or they'll have troubles like connecting it to the Wi-Fi, or But I do see more of that in the future with things. I do see them added a lot. So
yeah, that last one, man, that one did eat my lunch. And also, whoever installed the player system, they did stuff wrong, so then we had to redo. Like that's why we're there all day. But I hate player systems.
Yeah. I'm not even a big fan with the underlying principle of them. I don't know. I used to be more okay with it, but then also I used to be more okay with the idea of electronics in my acoustic guitar. And I've kind of like moved away from that more of just like keep it separate. And so I don't know.
I will tell you something just to swing the other way though, just to push against that a little
Yeah,
bit.
against.
So we just tuned for a customer who got one installed on their player, but her husband was the player of the piano, right? And he passed away, and she didn't want to get rid of the piano. And so she's like, well, maybe I could install a player. So, cause I don't play. And so, I mean, that's kind of sweet. And then another thing I did once that was so amazing is there was a guy, he was a dad. He had 6 kids. They were all adults, but he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? And so he would come into the store. I'm like, and he was a beautiful player and he'd compose his own music. So I had him come into the store on our QRS player, right? And then I had him like record his music playing it. And it was just like, we had it all on MIDI.
Okay.
So, and then my friend who transcribed it all into sheet music. And so it was like this like beautiful legacy. And so many people cried and were happy, and we could stream. Like so part of his will, we installed them on all the kids' pianos so that we could stream it, like him play. Anyway, it was just like this, like, whoa, like beautiful story. So I mean, there's a place for it for sure. And Christmas time, you guys, listening to Michael Bublé on the piano, and you have the QRS playing it. It's like, I don't know, I kind of like it.
All right. Yeah, you're bringing in some good points. And yeah,
They're cool when they work, but it's a nightmare when they don't.
That is true. That is true. And this lady in Colorado, I actually spent like 30 minutes on the phone because I know how to connect them. I'm like, I'll help you. I'll help you Wi-Fi it. And yeah, they can be a little bit of a hassle, though. That is true.
Such is the thing. Maybe that should be your slogan. Like, pianos, they're cool if they work. I love that. All right.
That's perfect, actually.
It kind of is. So on Friday, we're going to talk business. We're going to talk about things that you should be investing money and time into. And then next week, we're going to be really diving into some of the stuff that we're doing at Artisan on the daily of kind of the whole process of maybe the calibration and the lubrication. Now that we have the Grand, we kind of already did that with the upright, but now that we can do it with the Grand and show kind of, here's what Artisan does at the services. And we'll probably do Monday, we'll probably do the lubrication service. And then on Wednesday, we'll do the calibration service, and just in real time, you're going to see. And I'll try to have everything angled just right so you can see in real time. Here's how long it's taking. Here's what I'm doing, and my process through that. So, any questions before we head out?
I have a question about the grand trap work. How often do you find? I know on some above the sustain pedal, there's like a block of felt that stops it from going up to a certain point. How often do you find that block is too thick?
All the time.
Yeah. Why do you think it's like that? Like, to me, it's like, why was it set like this to begin with? Because, yeah, I'm always cutting those.
Let me think about it. Okay. What has changed over the 10 to 20 years that could have made it so that now it's...
Are you saying it didn't used to be as common?
What I'm saying is there's no way, that can't be, that back 20 years ago that this was as bad as it is today. Because you go to play it and your foot wants to keep going so bad.
Exactly. Yes. It's like so shallow. And like in so many concert settings, one of the first things I ever did, I was at a concert and they're like, Victor, the pedal's not working. And it was so shallow, like I'm talking like that pedal was going down like a half an inch. And that block was so thick. I'm like, why? I don't get it.
Yeah, I think, okay, so if I'm kind of diagnosing it, a lot of times that little pit, that little, the small dowel, it does have some kind of it does have usually some kind of a felt or leather on either side, as well as where it makes the tray. So that, I guess, could compress over time, and then they just regulated it up, the
Oh,
rod. And so that would make it so that we don't have as big of a, maybe, but no, I'm usually cutting a 1/4 inch off of those things. Something,
Yeah.
1/4 inch to get it to be where it should be. No, I have that happen all the time.
Okay, yeah, I just want to see if I wasn't the only one. But yeah, very common on granite. Like the one here at the church as well. I cut a good 1/2 inch or maybe even more because it's so shallow. Yeah, you want to keep pressing. And also as a player, there's a lot of techniques for pedaling. There's not just all the way down and all the way up. There's some in between. And so the more shallow that is, the less control you have. So yeah, that was one of the first things my dad complained about. He's like, son, he's like, it's really hard to pedal. He's like, I can't get a lot of that in between. And so, but yeah, it was super shallow, super shallow.
I've started getting one of these X-Acto knives that, you can, shoot out that razor, 3 or 4 inches, and then just kind of, I'm able to cut it like that. And so that's worked out. I've done that lately.
That's exactly what I do. But okay, I feel better that I know I'm not the only one.
We're all good there. Cool. Well, I will see you on Friday. We're going to talk about how you can spend more money and the ways you should be doing it, which is always fun. All right. Keep it real. I'll see you on Friday.